have gotten a lot of comments on Instagram and on YouTube, and I've seen this discourse all over the internet that Trump is not actually going to be that bad for the planet. So let's dive into what he did during his first administration and see kind of what that might look like again in this new administration, as well as what Project 2025 has to say about climate change. Hello everyone, it's Emma and welcome back to my channel where I do talk about all sorts of things zero waste topics, but I focus on free, easy, and fun ways to live low waste. But moving into some of my new content, I am going to be a little bit more politically inclined just because it's going to be important now more than ever for us to be involved in politics, aware of politics, especially as it pertains to the environment in our own rights. I am going to be talking about Donald Trump because we are moving back into a Trump administration. Yes, we could talk about other presidents in the past, but that is just simply not where we are in the current time, and I will address future presidents when that time comes. I've gotten a lot of comments in my last videos that I've made about politics being like, but Kamala Harris this, but Kamala Harris this. I'm like, well, unfortunately she lost, so we do not need to talk about her anymore. In my personal opinion, just because Donald Trump is a climate denier, saying that you were an environmentalist who voted for Trump is a little bit of an oxymoron. Further implore you to research Donald Trump's climate policy. I'm not going to change anybody's mind on who they vote for. This is simply just an educational video on how we can be prepared to best fight this as environmentalists, as climate activists. That's why I'm making this video, especially because I have gotten a lot of comments being like, but he's not so bad for the environment. Let's first talk about some of the stuff that Trump has done in the past during his first administration. Also, breaking news, this is actually going to be old news by the time that you're seeing this. You know Trump is going to be bad for the planet when the chief of ExxonMobil, the fossil fuel company, says, hey, Donald Trump's kind of bad for the planet. Hey, maybe Donald Trump shouldn't pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. That's how you know it's bad, when big oil is even saying. Now, are they doing it out of good intentions? I doubt it. I think they are doing it because they are probably investing in green energy themselves and want to keep making money. And two, I think they're finally starting to click that, hey, if everybody's dead, if our planet is dead, I can't make money. So I think they are coming from a place of greed, but still, if it takes greed to save the planet, I'll take it. Our first source is wilderness.org, and I specifically sought out sources that were written during his first administration. The first thing that comes to mind for me, especially because I'm an outdoor enthusiast, is Trump's major land grabs for public lands during his first administration. 2 national monuments in Utah, Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante, drastically reduced during his first administration for oil drilling. Just this one action was the single biggest rollback of land protections in American history. Like, since the creation of conservation 150 years ago or more, this was the worst we have seen for public lands, as well as several different wildlife refuges up in Alaska, but specifically the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which I believe is the largest national wildlife refuge in the US. This one wasn't shrunk, but it was highly encouraged during the Trump administration to continue drilling and operate new drilling operations in this wildlife refuge. Through December 2018, Trump had offered 98 million acres of land and water for oil development, which is an area larger than the state of Montana. But another 153.3 million acres of land and water, an area larger than the size of California and Washington combined, lost all of their protection. So this isn't necessarily saying like, we're going to take this piece of public land and start drilling oil. We're just going to take that piece of public land and now it's no longer protected. That's the difference between those two different chunks of land. Now, why is that important? You can check out my full video right here on why public lands are so key when it comes to fighting climate change. Simply put, it protects this land from drilling, from logging, from destruction of habitat, keeping these endangered species protected, and so much more, keeping clean air, clean water, and dark sky spaces. The list goes on and on and on. In general, we have statements like this and like this of Trump just simply saying climate change is a hoax. In fact, I actually made a video in, was it 2020 when he was rerunning against Biden? He had made these claims, and I have since heard his red hat followers spew this same rhetoric that the climate's not changing, we get snow in winter. The climate's not changing, it frosted today. You're thinking about weather. But he's also made some claims that the US has among the cleanest climates there are. Once again, getting confused pollution and emissions. Just because the US has clean air and water, sort of, we'll get to that in a moment, does not mean that we are not one of the leading contributors to climate change. In fact, here are the world's leading producers of climate change when it comes to countries. But he is wrong that we have the cleanest air in the world. Our air is not bad. We are 10th in the world. Once again, like, it's just a wrong claim. Not to mention, you know, he's boasting about this clean air, all the while behind the scenes, he and his administration sought to dismantle the Clean Air Act during his first administration. Now, why would somebody want to dismantle the Clean Air Act? Isn't clean air good? We will get to that later, and it has to do with manufacturing and oil. Not to mention, he also wants to reduce the scope of the Clean Water Act. This basically would remove protections from more than half of US wetlands. One of these examples is the boundary waters up in northern Minnesota, basically removing protections from this wetland area and then opening a mine in the wetland and other wetlands. Wetlands are one of our most important ecosystems for clean water, for clean air, for clean soil, for carbon sequestration, etc. So removing these protections is extremely dangerous for the climate and for our own health. I think that's something too that not enough people think about, is not only are all of these concerns for the broader climate change, but these are also concerns for us. Really, if you're concerned about health and you voted for Trump, all of these things that he did and will do again are bad for our own health. This is Brookings.edu, our next source. Just during Trump's first administration, there were 74 actions to date at the date of writing this, which I believe was in 2019, taken by the Trump administration to weaken environmental protection. Of course, in 2017, Trump promised to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement, which I'm quite confident that he did, and then Joe Biden rejoined, and of course now that Trump's back in office, so he will do that again. Now, what is the Paris Climate Agreement? Paris Climate Agreement, also called the Paris Climate Accords, is an international treaty on climate change that was signed in 2016. The treaty covers climate change mitigation, adaptation, and finance. The United States withdrew from the agreement in 2020, but rejoined in 2021. Basically what this is just a whole bunch of countries holding each other accountable for climate change, saying like, hey, some of us are emitting a lot. Maybe we should reduce our emissions. Maybe we should do this. Maybe we should do this. Holding themselves accountable, setting carbon goals. Is this perfect? Absolutely not. I think the goals are probably a little small. I think they could be striving for bigger and better. So I think this is an important agreement to stay in. Something else that Trump did in his first administration and that he's already touting he's going to do in his next is really just ramp up fossil fuel production in the US, which means cutting back on some environmental regulations. Climate change is at risk because he wants to drill more and extract more coal and oil. And then our health is at risk because in order to do that, we need to cut back on some of our standards for clean water and clean air, which means that we are going to be polluted, as well as other toxic substances from power plants and reduced regulation of the disposal and storage of coal ash, which is a residue that comes from coal mining, which contains mercury, arsenic, and other toxins, and all of which have led to water pollution. Why would he do this? Because his goal to fulfill the revival of the US coal industry. Something to note here, coal generation actually went down in 2019. Look, I'm so good for the planet. Coal reduction went down 22% from 2019 to 2016 when he first took office. So you're probably like, oh my gosh, Obama was so bad for the planet, Trump is so much better. No. Coal's decline is simply because natural gas is on the rise. Natural gas is the new hot fossil fuel in the market, and you can learn more about natural gas in this video. I did a full video on it about a year ago. It is a fossil fuel. It sounds better because it's natural gas. No, that's greenwashing. That is a specific tactic in order to make you think it's not so bad. It might be slightly cleaner for a fossil fuel, but that does not mean it's good. Sure, maybe there's not as much coal under a Trump administration, but there is still more other forms of fossil fuel extraction. I'll go ahead and insert a little bit of good news here, and it is what Brookings leaves us with, and is that as of them writing this in 2020, there were many court cases against the Trump administration for climate change by climate activists. I'm sure a bunch of people on the MAGA side are probably like, oh my gosh, these angry hippies, they're just sad and angry. They were not following the law. For example, with the Dakota Access Pipeline, they had to halt operations because the Army Corps of Engineers did not adequately consider the impacts of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe in its environmental assessment. So it's not just saying like, Dakota Access Pipeline bad, we're gonna fight it. It's like, no, I mean, yes, it's bad, but like, it's also bad legally. They did not follow legal things in order to get this pipeline established. Now let's move on to what is already happening with the Trump administration, but he is picking his cabinet members, and he has chosen the leader of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. That is Lee Zeldin. I knew nothing about him, so I did a quick little search. Basically, he says his first tasks will likely be starting the process to overturn several of the Biden EPA's biggest rules on climate change, to include tailpipe regulations for vehicles, which reduces emissions, rules aimed at slashing pollution from power plants, and oil and gas producers. On Monday, I'm recording this on Thursday, Zeldin says that he will pull back left-wing regulations and focus on unleashing economic prosperity through the agency. And that's kind of what Trump has been saying himself too at his rallies and stuff. It's saying like, we need more independence, we need more oil independence, we need more oil, we need more oil. Which of course makes perfect sense why he would put someone like Zeldin in this place in the EPA, so that Zeldin can pull back on all these restrictions and therefore open up more oil drilling in the US. This was probably the most concerning thing I read about Zeldin. So he was a congressman from New York. In 2020, the League of Conservation Voters, they kind of ranked all of New York's delegation, and he got the worst score out of everybody who is operating in the New York government. How they got to this rating was while he was in Congress, they found that he voted against several things the EPA is charged with leading on, including replacing lead service lines across the US. But apparently in 2020 though, Zeldin voted against a Republican amendment that would have slashed EPA funding. Perhaps that was part of his bigger plan. He wanted to make sure that he could get paid in 2025. Zeldin also voted against Biden's 2020 climate law, as did every other House Republican, and he is among the majority of House Republicans who voted against the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law, which contained EPA funding for clean school buses, cleanup of toxic brownfield sites, the funding to replace lead pipes. But once again, a small piece of good news here is that the EPA is on track to obligate nearly $38 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act passed by Biden by the end of the year, which will make it harder for Trump's administration to claw back at these things. It is a shred of hope. I don't know if you have gotten this within your circles, but I have definitely gotten this pushback on the internet months past where I've been talking about Project 2025 and how we should actually see it as a threat. Basically a bunch of red hat supporters being like, no, it's not going to happen. Trump does not endorse this, blah, 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 blah. It's not going to happen. You're just scaredy cat. It's happening. But the plans are in motion by who he's appointing to his cabinet. It's basically step by step what is being outlined Project 2025, as we're seeing with who's being appointed to the EPA. Let's just simply talk about what Project 2025 has to do with the climate, and not necessarily each of us individually, because that is scary in and of itself. Limit the scariness for today. The plan's recommendations include policy change that would stifle scientific research, sideline critical climate assessments, and discredit science as a guiding force for public policy. It would direct the president to critically analyze and potentially reject assessments from the USGCRP, the U.S. Global Change Research Program, a body responsible for the National Climate Assessment, a key scientific research. It was established in 1990 as an act of Congress. It is not policy. It is not about writing policy. It is just simply saying, hey, government, this exists. Do with it what you will. But basically what this is saying is, under Project 2025, this organization is just going to go away. Or maybe not necessarily go away, but Trump can simply just say, no, I don't believe what you say. We're not going to publish that. There are also other plans to target the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research within the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, simply just dismissing them as a source of climate alarmism and cutting their budgets. Is the stuff that they talk about scary? Absolutely. But is it alarmism? No. And I know exactly why they're saying this, because when enough people are aware of climate change and its impacts on us and the planet, enough people are going to be anti-fossil fuels. Enough people are going to be anti this administration. And they don't want that. They want to keep drilling, and therefore they want to keep spewing this climate denial in order to keep people invested in fossil fuels and just make us over here who believe in climate change look like stupid hippies who don't know what weather is. Project 2025 also aims to reinstate fossil fuels at the center of U.S. energy policy. Basically, forget all of the progress we have made for wind and solar and nuclear. We're going back to fossil fuels. Again, Trump has said plenty of times in his rallies and his acceptance speech for the presidency that he is so excited to drill oil, that liquid gold. This is also a call to dismantle the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, FECM, and to roll back carbon reduction initiatives. What Project 2025 is doing is equating energy security with fossil fuels, but we can have a secure energy grid with green energy. Maybe not 100% green energy right this second, but that's why we need to be slowly building it up over time so that one day we can be solely relying on 100% renewable energy, because it does take time to build up to that. They also state that this is a continuation of policies from his first term, which is nothing that we should be surprised about. During his first term, the Trump administration systemically slashed research funding for renewable energy. So not only were they reducing funding for renewable energy projects, but also for the research. And something else that they're doing, I would honestly lean towards calling this propaganda, is that they're kind of declaring this a war on fossil fuels, basically to put fossil fuels as under threat or under siege. Even if they're doing that wholeheartedly, I don't think they are. I think they are doing it maliciously. I think they know exactly what they are doing with that language. But even if they do believe that in their heart, it's not just because some hippies are sad. It's because fossil fuels are literally the leading contributors to climate change. And once again, as I've said many times in this video, not only are fossil fuels exacerbating climate change, accelerating climate change, it is also a massive risk to our own health, especially people who live near the oil drilling sites, people who live near oil refineries, and typically those are people of low income, people of color. You know, it's not these rich billionaires who want the money from big oil. It is not them facing the consequences. It is us everyday people. Now, something I don't think we think about enough is not only Trump himself, his policy, but also how he is impacting the entire government, as well as, you know, his actions that he took in his first presidency are, some of them are still in effect. Some of them are still affecting us to this day. Not what he does in those 4 years stays in those 4 years. It continues on. For example, during his first administration, he picked three Supreme Court nominations, drastically tipping the scales in the Supreme Court, and look where that's gotten us. But specifically for the environment, the Supreme Court, I think it was this year, maybe it was last year, overturned the Chevron decision, which was huge. This ruling reduces the power of federal agencies to interpret laws they enforce and shifts the power to the courts. Basically, it takes away abilities from experts, from scientists about things like climate change, and just gives it to the courts. Look at how the courts are turning. The courts are becoming full of climate deniers. So basically, this ruling weakens the power of the executive branch agencies like the EPA. Not that it matters, there's a climate denier in charge of it now, but it could lead to more challenges to regulations across the government, right? And he appointed these people in 2019 and 2020, and they didn't make this decision for 5 years. So like stuff that he did in his first term, stuff that he will do in his next term will affect us and climate policy and climate change for years to come. Now, I'm not making this video to scare anybody. This is just simply kind of like, hey, we've been here before. We have fought this before. We know what to expect because Project 2025 is so closely outlined for the climate on what he did in his first term. And there are organizations like Earth Justice and Greenpeace who have fought this as well as fought under Biden. Like, I'm not trying to say like Democrats are great for the planet. They're not. They're better, but they're not going to save us either. There were still petitions that we signed, lawsuits against the Biden administration for the climate. This is what we're moving into. This is what we need to be prepared for as environmentalists. And I hope that this was just kind of eye-opening. We simply need to help them with their petitions, signing letters, boosting their message. UCS USA leaves us with some happy parting words as well. Yes, Project 2025 is a devastating roadmap for deregulation and fossil fuel expansion, but it does not spell defeat. It is a wake-up call, rather. This agenda represents a particular worldview. While it may influence federal policy, it will not entirely determine the course of climate action. During Trump's first term, we witnessed the judiciary pushback against anti-science actions, even under pressure to limit regulatory powers. As individuals, advocates, and communities, we have the power to shape our energy future and fossil climate accountability, regardless of who sits in the White House. And I've said this in my other political videos, and I'll say it again. I was gonna take this sort of action regardless of who won the election. Would I have been a little less scared if Kamala Harris won? Absolutely. But my goal in voting for her was not like, she's amazing, she's the best politician I've ever met, ever. My theory in voting for her was, she's the better of our two choices. Unfortunately, we only have two real choices. And once she gets elected, I'm about to bully her. Ma'am, you need to get to work. Get to work, get to work, get to work. And I think a lot of other activists felt that way too. Like, we're not electing a friend here. We're electing someone who needs to get the work done for us. And I like that they say that as well. Like, no matter who's in the White House, there's always going to be a fight for climate change. Sometimes the fight might be easier, sometimes the fight might be harder, depending on who is there, but there's always going to be a fight. And I think their other key message here was, see what you can do in your direct community. Try to influence climate in your own spaces. Something as simple as starting a recycling program at your school or work, which I have a video about how to do that up here. Again, really, really small, but it had an impact. If you want to take it a step further, maybe you could run for school board, run for mayor, go to your town halls, go to your city halls, and actually talk to your politicians and get involved locally. See if your local government can reduce water and air pollution in your town. See if they can better increase recycling or even start a composting program. You can do this stuff locally. Now, just because you go to a town hall and say, hey, we should have community composting, doesn't mean that they're going to implement it right away. But if you show up, facts with statistics, with an example of how other cities have done this, kindly, open-heartedly, ready to have a discussion with them, over time, something might come to fruition. You have to phrase stuff in a way that is bipartisan or like, that goes across aisles. You can't just say like, I'm an angry hippie and I hate fossil fuels. Let's do XYZ. That's probably going to scare some people away. I'm speaking from experience. You have to come with it at a frame of mindset that they understand and that they will get behind. For example, I like that plenty of these articles that I cited today focused on the public health crisis that comes with fossil fuels as well. Like, yeah, fossil fuels are terrible for the planet, but they're also bad for us to breathe in, or any other measure you're trying to get. If you want your own city to remove lead pipes, don't come at it from a place of environmentalism. Come at it from a place of, again, public health. In the US, we are quite selfish. That is just how our society has built us to be. And so when I tell people like, hey, you can live zero waste, not necessarily for the environment, but to save you money. You can cut emissions, not for the planet, but to reduce your own health risks and help you live a long and healthy life, actually clicks with people because it's hard to care about the broad planet. It's hard to visualize that. The planet is so big. There are so many people here, so many different people and climates. But if you can get people to care about their own life, their own house, their own town, their own state, start small, it will start to grow bigger and bigger. Of course, here the fear is what they're going to do federally because federal law does surpass state law. There are plenty of states trying to enact climate change policy right now in these next 2 months, as well as other sort of policy to protect people of color, protect queer people, protect women in their states. And that's excellent. But, what if some of these federal laws come down? That's kind of what makes me nervous. It is really giving me hope that there are governors out there that care about their people, care about all of their people. They care about the planet. And that does give me hope. I really encourage you to follow organizations like Earth Justice and Greenpeace. I will leave more tags down below. I just followed a whole bunch this week and I can't remember them off the top of my head just yet. And I'll also leave some of my other favorite activists down below who post really, really educational videos, post great content about signing petitions and letters. And I will also be sharing more content about signing petitions, writing letters, etc., etc. Over on Instagram, mostly. I have started to do it here on the community page as well, but definitely follow me on Instagram for real-time updates on my stories, as well as join my activism channel right here in the Instagram DMs where I will be sharing this stuff as well. One day I might lose 100% of my hope, but not yet. I still have some hope left. As more cabinet member rollouts come out, that does scare me a little bit. For now, there is hope to be had. I encourage you to also not just focus on what he's doing badly for the planet, but focus on small things that are going good for the planet. I think I would like to start making a monthly segment about good climate news, not necessarily like that the Trump administration is doing. I hope that they do good things for climate. I truly do. Like, this is just predictions. I hope that they're totally wrong. I hope that the Trump administration is good for the planet. It is a good hope to have. And I hope that maybe one day in one of those videos, I can say, hey, look, the Trump administration did something great for the planet. But I think that many of our climate wins in the next 4 years will be small ones, will be state wins, will be wins from other countries, etc., etc. But a win is a win. So I'll take whatever wins we can get. Remember to keep the good news in your feed as well. Don't just fill your feed with bad news and scary stuff. Keep the good news there. Keep the joy. Keep the hope, because all that is essential to staying in the movement. If we get too bogged down with doom, we're gonna leave. We're gonna leave the movement and we're not gonna keep fighting. So keep hopeful, keep the joy, share some good news down below, inspire us, boost our spirits. I hope that you found this helpful for moving forward as an environmentalist. And I really like that all these sources that I had also were hopeful at the end, which makes me feel a little bit better, right? Because like they know more than me. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. Let me know what other sort of political content you want me to see, like political environmental. I'll see you in the next video, but until then, remember that your small actions make a big difference in the long run. Bye guys.